What's up guys, it's me again, Steven, and today I'll be taking you on a little bit of a different trip. So if you remember my last video, which if you haven't checked out yet, I recommend you do to get some context about what this all going to be about. I'll link it down in the description or put in an annotation somewhere around the screen. However, in the last video I went over the more architectural overview of the idea the project is trying to realize. And if you remember, I mentioned that me and Alavi spent some time working on the project in the background. And well, seeing as part of documenting our journey is also showing you guys the work we do and the progress we make, I want to take this opportunity to kick things off with the pre-devlog sort of idea and show you guys what we've been doing in the background over the last period. So I'm sitting behind my workstation, I have the application code open on the latest version as of recording this video. In this case I'm running the application on a virtual device. However, for my developers out there, if your device is unable to run Android emulators or you just don't want to run an Android emulator, you can just use needle command you see on the screen to display your phone screen right on your PC if you're on Linux. Also make sure to put down in the description for ease of access. I'll start with an overview of the application, which, disclaimer, is pretty bare bones and not gonna lie, it looks kind of bad, which is to be expected for an application early development. But we're here on the landing page where it's already prompting for permission, which is to be expected from a navigation application. In this case, we will allow it. And it shows a beautiful map of, in this case, Amsterdam. You can also see several features on the screen. However, we'll start with the map as it's the central piece of the application. As stated in our previous videos, check them out by the way if you haven't, one of our key values is open source, which is something we want to incorporate into Lucian where possible. This is why we decided to go with OpenStreetMap as our main map provider. I personally have had great experiences navigating with OpenStreetMap, and I think it will provide a good foundation for our application. I do have to mention that we do leave the door open for any other map providers in the future, but for the prototype we're working towards, we'll focus on OpenStreetMaps. Aside from the map, you see several other elements such as search bar, a drawer menu, the navigation menu, and these fun little prefabs you can move around all over the place, which is not permanent by the way, we are going to change that in future versions, but for now we'll keep it in. So with this screen as an example, let's take a look at the code behind the application. On the Flutter side of things, you can see here the homepage open, which contains all the code that you see here on the screen. It's mostly centralized around this part of the code, which on first glance looks pretty clean and compact, and although it does go a bit deeper than this. But for the people who are new to Flutter, let me go over this from the top so you get an idea what the application looks like. So one of the basic concepts of Flutter is that everything is a widget. For the people who know Python, this is similar to how everything in Python is an object. And before you ask me what a widget is, honestly, I don't know, I don't really care, as long as it's Word, I can call it whatever. But these widgets are structured in a hierarchical tree with each other with its corresponding functions, which translates to the visual overview you see over here. So our home screen over here is a widget, which has a very important sub-widget, namely the build widget. So if we were to translate it, here we're basically saying, hey, build me a scaffold with a body containing a stack, with several components such as a section containing the map, the search button that expands when you click on it, the buttons you can move around all over the map, and outside of the stack the bottom drawer menu and the bottom navigation menu you see over here. You can take this part away at the moment as we'll cover it later in the video. So it looks pretty clear on the surface, but it goes deeper as selecting, for example, the map section. You see nested within its build function a map widget, which if we click on it, it shows to be the component of the map itself with several properties, for example, the location where we get the map from. And with this quick overview, I hope you can start to see now how Flutter creates this hierarchical tree of widgets, with each their visual components and functions to find the right in the code, which is then translated on what you see here on the screen. Now to go back on the part we skipped, this is part of Flutter block, which is a state management library to help separate the business logic from the UI and thus organize your application structure a bit. However, if you're interested, I recommend the tutorials made by this channel named Flutterly. Not only can he explain Flutter and Flutter block way better than I did, but he also has a tutorial going over Flutter block in its entirety. So I hope the previous bit gave those who are less familiar with Flutter a better insight into the structure of the application. But now let's go over the features we've realized up until this point. Let's start with geocoding. So as stated before, OpenStreetMap will serve as the main map provider. However, the only thing a map provider actually does is provide a map, or should I say tiles, which are essentially just the squares on the screen in which a picture of the map is rendered. So essentially everything you see here is just a grid of images that change when you zoom in or out. Actually finding location on the map using names and addresses is essentially what geocoding is. And of course you can't create a navigation solution if you can't even look up locations. So for our solution, in line with adopting open source, we'll be using Nominatim for geocoding, which is an open source geocoding tool. Implementing geocoding during development did cause quite the issues. You see, Flutterblock works by registering and listening to events, and based off that changing the state of the widget. However, in this case we were updating the map at the same time as the your location icon. This meant we had two widgets generating events which puts on state changes, which by definition overrode each other constantly, which is very annoying if you're trying to look the road ahead of you. Eventually we solved this by creating an extra state that works as a check and switches to the one necessary based on the situation. Let's take the Starbucks over at Delft as an example. As you can see, it looks up the location, and if I click on it, geocoding does this thing and brings us over right here to Delft Station, where the Starbucks is located. From here you'll be able to in the future select this as your destination and start your navigation. To implement this, we're currently using the Nominatim API, of which at this moment we're making use of the fair use policy to test and prototype the app. However, in the future we aim to host it ourselves, as the Nominatim project is a free and open source project that runs on donations and does operate with limited capacity. So keep that in mind if you decide to use it for your own project. And last feature we want to go over is device management. So the original idea with the prototype is to have the application connect to a navigation companion. However, we want to account for the possibility the user might have multiple navigation companions he can connect to, or the possibility that future devices can also interact with the application, which is why we decided to implement device management into our application, which you can find over here in this little tab Devices. Starting from this menu, the idea is that you'll be able to register compatible devices such as the navigation companion locally with the application, and from there you'll be able to check out some basic statistics such as the battery life, the connection status, and perform basic actions such as giving it an alias or connecting to the device itself, which the last action, by the way, is something you can also do from the Bluetooth menu on your phone itself. Speaking of which, Bluetooth, namely Bluetooth Low Energy. This will serve as the fundamental communication protocol between the application and the device itself. And as part of getting the device management to work, the underlying scaffolding for Bluetooth had to be built first, which at first didn't sound too hard until I had to deal with permissions. So to be able to use Bluetooth, we had to make sure the application had the necessary permissions. Considering we intend to keep everything centralized to Flutter, I stumbled upon the Flutter package named Permission Handler to handle both permissions on Android and iOS. This package allows for the checking of permissions to the application and on certain permissions prompt the user for permission. Note the usage of the word some, because what I didn't know was that certain permissions can be checked but can't be prompted due to the way Android's architecture is set up. This resulted in me having to insert all these permissions into the Android manifest and overall losing a lot of time trying to find the permissions and figuring out which permissions are prompted for permission and which not. However, I do see an opportunity here for any developer working on Android's operating system, as making it possible to prompt all permissions using Flutter will make development overall easier, more centralized, making it more likely for developers to choose Flutter for developing the next app. But that's just an idea. I'll leave it to whomever wants to pick it up and show it to some development lead or manager over at Google. And with this we come to the end of our initial devlog. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll make sure to keep this coming every so often to keep you guys up to date with the development of the project. If you have any questions or anything that remains unclear, please leave a comment. I'll make sure to answer it in the comments. If you like our video, leave a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep up to date with the development, or follow us on any of our other socials. Wherever in the world you are, I wish you a great day and thank you very much for watching.